Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to start the second part of analytical epidemiology, that is cohort study. In the previous lecture classes, we were telling you or describing you about the various types of analytical studies. And today, before starting the second type of analytical study, that is cohort study, we'll try to understand what is analytical epidemiology. So analytical studies are the second major type of epidemiological studies. The subject of interest here in this analytical studies is the individual within the population. Objective is not to formulate but to test the hypothesis. Remember, when we have studied descriptive epidemiology, we understood how to frame an hypothesis. But now the onus of proving the hypothesis or testing the hypothesis lies on analytical epidemiology. That is, first we have to do a case control study followed by a cohort study. So as you understand, we need to concentrate upon two types of observational studies, that is case control study and cohort study. Besides, there are other two, that is again ecological study or correlation study and cross-sectional study or prevalence study. So from each of the study designs, one can determine whether or not a statistical association exists between a disease and a suspected factor. And if one exists, what will be the strength of the association? A schematic design of a case control study and a cohort study is mentioned in the next slide for your understanding. So as we have seen the framework of a case control study and cohort study, and if you focus on the cohort study, if you see the direction of inquiry is forwards, and it starts with the population, and that is the people without the disease. And then exposure, we find how many of them are diseased, how many of them are not diseased. And among those who are not exposed to the particular risk factor or causative agent, how many are developing the disease and how many are not developing the disease. This is further explained by this particular slide again. So the direction in time is prospective, future. So what we do is in the exposed group, that is the people or individuals who are exposed to a particular factor, is compared to that of another group who are not exposed to a particular factor. So the exposed group, and we observe what is the presence of a particular disease in both these groups. So cohort study, as we understand, is another type of analytical study or observational study in which is usually undertaken to obtain additional evidence to refute. It means to not refute means not to support, or support the existence of an association between a suspected cause and disease. If you remember, in the beginning of the class, I said in descriptive epidemiology, we formulate a hypothesis by various means. And we need to prove this hypothesis further in a case control study and a cohort study. So cohort study is another type of analytical study or observational study, which helps in further testing the hypothesis. This cohort study is known by a variety of names. If you can remember the short name like PLIF, P-L-I-F. So PLIF is nothing but prospective study, longitudinal study, incidence study, and forward-looking study. So what are the distinguishing features of cohort studies? So here we understand that the cohorts are identified prior to the appearance of the disease under investigation. Unlike in a case control study where the disease has already occurred, and we divide the groups into cases and controls. Cases are those with the disease and controls are those without the disease. But here we identify people who are exposed to a particular risk factor and another group which is not exposed to a risk factor. We can always say that as a study cohort and a control cohort. The study groups who are identified are observed over a period of time. These study groups means the study cohorts and the control cohorts are observed over a period of time, say 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, to determine the frequency of disease among them. How many among the study cohort or the exposed cohort are getting the disease? How many among the control cohort are not getting the disease? And you compare the frequency of the disease among the study cohort and the frequency of disease among the control cohort. And if you see if the frequency in the study cohort is more than the control cohort, we say that there is an association between the risk factor and the outcome. The study proceeds from cause to effect, unlike in a case control study which proceeds from effect to cause. Now, In epidemiological studies, we should understand what is meant by a cohort. The term cohort, as defined, it is a group of people who share a common characteristic or experience within a defined time period or time period. Example, age, occupation, exposure to a drug or to a vaccine or pregnancy, insured preference. Birth cohort. Suppose if a group of children are born in the year 2020 in the month of June, it is said to be a birth cohort. Likewise, exposure cohort. If a group of people or a group of children are exposed to a vaccine or to a particular drug or a particular chemical therapy or influence, then we call it as a exposure cohort. Suppose if a group of people, say males and females, are getting married in a particular date or a particular month, then we call it as a marriage cohort. Suppose a group of people are surviving after being treated by chemotherapy, say in lung cancer, say after 5 years, they are known as a survival cohort. So now you would have understood or got a brief understanding about what is meant by cohort. Indications for cohort studies. These studies are usually indicated when there is a good evidence of association between the exposure and the disease as derived or supported by clinical observations. What we find in day-to-day observations in clinics or in hospitals, if there is a good evidence of association, then this particular cohort studies can be done. And it can be supported by, and they should be supported by descriptive or case control studies. When exposure is raised, but evidence of disease is high among exposed. When attrition of the study population can be minimized. And when ample funds are available. Now, this is a framework of a cohort study. You can see a 2x2 contingency table where there are 2 rows and 2 columns. And here, what we have, the cohort groups are divided into, the cohort is divided into 2 groups. Exposed to a putative etiological agent, that is a study cohort or the exposure cohort. Putative means thought to be related to a particular cause. So here, the group is study cohort and exposure cohort is A plus B. A plus B, that is a study cohort or the exposure cohort. Now, not exposed to a putative etiological agent or factor, they are C plus D. So C plus D is the control cohort. So we need to find out about what is the exposure of the disease among the exposed cohort, frequency of disease among the exposed or the study cohort. That is A by A plus B into 1000. Likewise, what is the frequency of exposure among the control cohort? So frequency of disease among non-exposed in the control cohort. That is C by C plus D into 1000. So if we get the frequency of disease among the exposed cohort is more than the frequency of disease among the control cohort, then we say that there is an association between the risk factor and the outcome. One must remember that while in assembling cohorts, the following considerations should be taken into account. Cohorts must be free from the disease under study. So since the disease has not occurred from the start of the study, you should be very careful in selecting a study cohort and a control cohort which are actually free from the disease. Because you are going to study the occurrence of disease in them after a period of time, say in the future. Both the study cohorts and the control cohorts should be equally susceptible to the disease under study or efficiently reflect any difference in the disease occurrence. It means that both of them should have the equal capability of being infected to a particular risk factor or being exposed to a particular risk factor and subsequently developing the disease. Both the groups should be comparable in respect of all possible variables which may influence the frequency of the disease. So all the variables, say age, sex, occupation, are to be comparable. The diagnostic and eligible criteria of the disease must be defined beforehand. So what should be a study? What should be a study group? What should be a control group? Should be understood so that we can very well take them into consideration. Types of cohort study. There are 3 types of cohort studies which has been identified, and they have been distinguished on the basis of time of occurrence of disease in relation to the time at which the investigation is initiated and continued. So what are they? They are prospective cohort studies, retrospective cohort studies, a combination of retrospective and prospective cohort studies, which are also known as ambispective cohort studies. So ambispective is AMBISPECTIVE. Ambispective means ambi means combination of retro and prospective cohort studies. So what are prospective cohort studies? Prospective studies, cohort studies are also known as current cohort studies, in which the outcome has not occurred at the time the investigation begins. Most prospective studies begin in the present and continue into the future. So for example, the long-term effects of exposure to uranium and the subsequent development of lung cancer. So if you are studying the effects of uranium exposure among miners in a uranium mine and compared to that of non-miners, and see what is the frequency of development of lung cancer, you find that the frequency of lung cancer is more in miners exposed to uranium compared to that of non-miners not exposed to uranium. So in this, what we understand is uranium is the cause as far as the development of lung cancer is concerned. Similar examples are US Public Health Services Framingham Heart Study, Doll and Hill's prospective study on smoking and lung cancer, study of oral contraceptives and health by the Royal College of General Practitioners. Retrospective cohort study or historical cohort study is one where the outcomes have all occurred before the start of the investigation. So here the outcomes have all occurred before the start of the investigation. But what happens is the investigator goes back in time, say 20 to 30 years back, to study his study groups, to select his study groups, that is the study cohort and the control cohort, from the existing records, say medical records or employment records, and he traces them forward through time from a past date fixed on the records, usually up to the present. So from a past date fixed on the records, he usually comes to the present. So he comes to the present to ascertain this type of cohort study or to assemble this type of cohort study and see the result. This study is known by a variety of names such as retrospective cohort study, historical cohort study, prospective cohort study in retrospect, and non-current prospective study. So, for example, the effects of electronic fetal monitoring and neonatal death. This study was conducted in the Boston Hospital, a hospital in Boston, where they have tried to assemble a cohort of 17,080 babies in the year 1978, and the cohort was assembled of the babies. The cohort was assembled of the babies were born between 69 and 74. So here they have studied the effect of electronic fetal monitoring upon the neonates. What they found was the death rate in the neonates is 1.7 times more in neonates who are not subjected to electronic fetal monitoring compared to that of infants who are subjected to electronic fetal monitoring. So this says that electronic fetal monitoring is very important as far as the neonatals, as far as the health of neonates is concerned, and as well as the neonatal death is concerned. The other examples are study of the role of arsenic in human carcinogenesis, study of the role of lung cancer in uranium miners, study of the mortality experience of groups of physicians in relation to the probable exposure to radiation, study of angiosarcoma of the liver in relation to PVC or polyvinyl chloride. As we understand, these type of studies are generally more economical. And because the outcome has already occurred, one needs to go back in passage of time. So unlike in a case control study, here the disease are not identified. So it is the investor goes back in time and assembles the study cohort and the control cohort. And these produce results more quickly than prospective cohort studies. Now, the third type is a combination of retrospective and prospective cohort studies. In this type of cohort studies or ambidextrous cohort studies, both the retrospective and the prospective elements are combined. Means both the past and the future elements are combined. The cohort is identified from the past records, just like in a retrospective cohort study, and is assessed of date for the outcome. And from the particular date, it is followed into the future. That is a prospective component is added. So the same cohort is followed prospectively into the future. So the typical example is Coate, Brown and Dahl to study the effects of radiation. So how the various types of cohort study are understood can be seen in this particular slide. So if the present is taken as the year 2020 and the past is taken as year 2010 and the future is taken as the year 2030. So if you are doing a study in 2020 and looking for the result subsequently in 2030, it is known as prospective cohort study or current cohort study. So if you go back in time, say from the year 2020 to year 2010, and you are assembling the cohort there and you are following the cohort up to the present, this is known as historical cohort study or retrospective cohort study. So if you are going back in time and again following it up to the present, say if you assemble the cohort in 2020 and you go back in time to study about this, to study about the study group and the control study cohort and the control cohort and follow them up to 2020 and subsequently follow them again for a period, say another 10 years, say 2030, then it is a combination of retrospective and prospective. Retrospective component is from 2010 to 2020 and prospective component is 2020 to 2030. So it is also known as an ambidextrous cohort study. So this is also understood by this present slide as given here. This is a prospective cohort study. This is a retrospective cohort study. This is an ambidextrous cohort study. What are the various elements of a cohort study? So you need to by heart this following steps because this comes as a long question. What describe a cohort study? Mention briefly about the steps or elements of a cohort study. So you need to understand the what are the various steps. So what are the various steps? They are selection of study subjects, obtaining data on exposure, selection of comparison group, then follow-up and analysis. So selection of study subjects or study cohorts or exposure cohorts. So studies of cohorts can be from the general population. The general population is usually in a political, administrative and a particular geographical area from which they are selected, and the study cohort and the control cohort are usually also selected, and the study cohort should be representative of the population being selected. Now the special groups are select groups. The select groups can be usually professional groups. They can be doctors, nurses, or lawyers, or civil servants, or police, or like that. And they can be obstetric population, insured persons, volunteers, or any other group like that. Or they can be exposure groups like uranium miners, or they can be also like people working in a particular mine, or doctors exposed, or radiologists exposed to radiation. So they can be the exposure group. Obtaining data on exposure. How the data can be obtained on the various groups. From the cohort members, they usually the data is obtained by personal interviews and mailed questionnaires, and usually either one or two of them can be followed. Usually the mailed questionnaires is commonly followed. For example, Dahl and Hill, who conducted the study on smoking and lung cancer among the British medical doctors, they sent them mailed questionnaire and they asked them to fill it up regarding their pattern of smoking, and that's how they were able to obtain data. Next is review of records. The records can be like the medical records, employment records, medical records suggesting about the type of treatment, that is whether it is surgery, the amount of drugs that are given, medical treatment, or the amount of exposure. So all these can be got from a medical record or from an employment record. The data can be got. Medical examination or special test. They can be got from a clinical examination of the study cohort and the control cohort. And special tests, for example, measuring of blood pressure or doing a laboratory investigations like measurement of serum cholesterol or for doing ECG. These are all the data can be obtained by these, or environmental surveys regarding the exposure of a particular factor which is there in the environment, whether it can be air, water, or soil, and which is responsible for exposure to the study cohort. All this can be obtained from this. Selection of comparison groups, that is the control cohort or the unexposed cohorts. So how they can be done? They can be by internal comparison. For example, if there is an external control cohort, internal comparison can be done. This can be possible by let us discuss about smoking and lung cancer. So the cohorts can be assembled on the pattern of a group of people or group of smokers who are smoking half pack of cigarettes, or a group of smokers smoking half to 1 pack of cigarettes, and a group of smokers smoking 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes, and a group of smokers smoking more than 2 packs of cigarettes. All these groups can be compared with each other to understand about the occurrence of disease or pattern of disease or the effect in that. External comparison. You compare smokers with that of non-smokers, or radiologists with that of ophthalmologists. So you have an external comparison group to study the effect of a particular thing. So like if you are smokers and non-smokers, you study the effect of smoking on smokers and that of non-smokers. And what is the occurrence of lung cancer among smokers and non-smokers? So what is the comparison with general population rates? Suppose you don't have an external group, you can always compare the study cohort with that of a control cohort, which is taken from the general population. For example, you are studying about the relationship between uranium and lung cancer. You can always study about the frequency of lung cancer among miners working in uranium mine to that of the frequency of lung cancer among the general population. Follow-up. Usually the follow-up of both the study cohort and the control cohort is done by periodic medical examination of each member of the cohort, or by reviewing physician and hospital records, or by routine surveillance of death records, or by mailed questionnaires, telephone calls, and periodic home visits, preferably all the three on an annual basis. Now, we need to analyze whatever we have got from both the study cohort and the control cohort about the incidence of outcome among the exposed and the non-exposed and the estimation of risk. So in this 2:2 contingency table regarding the cigarette smoking and lung cancer, we find that the study cohort or the exposure cohort is around here is 7,000, of which 70 people have developed lung cancer and 6,930 have not developed lung cancer. And the control cohort is 3,000. So their direction is like this. So out of 3,000, 3 have developed lung cancer. So, so we need to understand what is the frequency of lung cancer among smokers compared to that of non-smokers. So incidence rate, what is incidence rate? Disease or death among the total population by the total population. So how many are having the disease? 70. How many are, what is the population? That is a denominator at risk, that is 7,000. 70 by 7,000 into 1,000 is 10, or 10 per 1,000 population. Incidence rate among smokers is 10 per 10,000 population. Among non-smokers is, what is the frequency of disease? That is C by C plus D. That is 3 by 3,000 into 1,000. That is 1 per 1,000 population, or 1. So we find that the incidence rate among smokers is more than the incidence rate among non-smokers. So what is the incidence rate among smokers? It is 10. or 10 per 1,000 population. So it is definitely 10 is more than 1 or 1 per 1,000 population. So if you do a chi-square test or standard error of proportion, we find there is an association between smoking and lung cancer. And the p-value is less than 0.001, which you will understand in detail in statistics class. What is p-value? What is a chi-square test? What is standard error of proportion? Now, estimation of risk. To estimate the risk of outcome in exposed and non-exposed cohorts, this is understood by means of two indices: relative risk and attributable risk. So, what is relative risk? So, or risk ratio? You may at times relative risk, attributable risk, and population attributable risk often comes as short notes in the university examination. So, here we need to understand what is relative risk or risk ratio. Sometimes you may get a short note as risk ratio. Risk ratio is nothing but relative risk. So relative risk is incidence of disease or death in the exposed by incidence of disease or death among non-exposed. So what does it do? It is a direct measure of the strength of association between the suspected cause and effect. So if the relative risk is 1, it means that there is no association between the risk factor and the outcome or cause and effect. If it is more than 1, there is a positive association between the exposure and the disease under study. And if the relative risk is more than 2, it means the incidence of disease is 2 times higher in the exposed group compared to that of non-exposed group. So if you look into this following example, the incidence of disease among exposed, was out of total 7,000 who are exposed, 70 have got the disease. So the incidence of disease among exposed is 70 by 7,000 into 1,000. That is 10. Likewise, the incidence of disease among non-exposed is 1. So the relative risk is 10. So what does it understand? What does it give? Tell us there is 10 times the risk of developing lung cancer among smokers compared to that of non-smokers. So the smokers have 10 times the propensity or the risk of developing lung cancer compared to that of non-smokers. Now, what is attributable risk or risk difference? So, attributable risk or risk difference is nothing but the difference in the incidence of disease among exposed minus incidence of disease among non-exposed, and it is divided by incidence of disease among exposed into 100. So, attributable risk is also known by another name called risk difference. Remember that here the multiplying factor is 100, unlike in a relative risk where there is no multiplying factor. It is simply a ratio there. So what we understand from the previous example is, so incidence of disease among exposed is 10, my incidence of disease among non-exposed is 1. So if you look into this example, IE minus INE divided by INE into 100. So 10 minus 1 by 10 into 100 is 90%. It means that 90% of the lung cancer among smokers can be attributed to smoking, or 90% of the lung cancer among the smokers can be eliminated if smoking is banned or cigarette smoking is banned. So it tells us to what extent the disease under study can be attributed to the exposure. So 90% of the lung cancer among smokers is due to smoking. Now, what do you mean by population attributable risk? It is almost similar to that of attributable risk. Only thing is, we need the first thing that we need to include is the incidence of disease or death in the total population. So instead of incidence of disease or death in the exposed population, what we need to write is incidence of disease or death in the total population minus incidence of disease or death among those who are not expected to the causal factor by incidence of disease or death in the total population into 100. So this population attributable risk, if you look into the following example, so the incidence of disease or death in heavy smokers is 224, the incidence of disease or death among non-smokers is 10, the incidence of disease or death among the total population is 74. If you look at relative risk, it is 224 divided by 10, that is 22.4. There is 22 times the development of lung cancer among smokers compared to that of non-smokers. Here, if you look at the population attributable risk, is incidence of disease or death in the total population, which comes to 74, that is C, minus B divided by C, that is 74 minus 64 divided by 74, that is 86%. So, here B it is 10. I'm sorry, so you have written as 64, it is 10. 74 minus 10 divided by 74 into 100. That is 64 by 74 into 100. That is 86%. 86% of deaths from lung cancer could have been avoided if the risk factor of smoking is eliminated or cigarette smoking is publicly banned. So what the population attributable risk is a public health measure and is usually an administrative measure. Usually the administrators calculate the population attributable risk and accordingly they impose the ban or enforce legislative measures to see that the particular disease is avoided or eliminated. So C minus B by C. That is 86% as we got in this case particular example. Now, we should understand what is relative risk, what is attributable risk. Difference between relative risk and attributable risk. Relative risk is a better index for assessing etiological causation, whereas attributable risk is not useful for etiological assessment. The larger the relative risk, the stronger the association between the cause and the effect. The attributable risk, it gives us an idea about what extent the disease under study can be attributed to exposure. Relative risk doesn't reflect the potential public health importance of the disease. As I said earlier, in attributable risk or population attributable risk, it reflects the potential public health importance of a particular disease. Relative risk doesn't give an idea of the impact of a successful preventive or public health program. Attributable risk gives an idea of the impact of a successful preventive or public health program. The relative risk and attributable risk can be understood by this following example. The relative risk and attributable risk of cardiovascular complications in women taking oral contraceptives. If you look at the relative risk of women taking oral contraceptives, you find that it is between 30 to 39, it is 2.8, and 40 to 44, it is 2.8. But if you look at the attributable risk in both these age groups, it is 3.5 into 30 to 39, and in 40 to 44, it is 20. It means there is almost 5 to 6 times the jump in attributable risk when we see in this particular age group. It means that higher age groups are responsible for causation of cardiovascular complications in women taking oral contraceptives. From this, we understand that oral contraceptives should not be given to women of higher age group, preferably above the age of 35 years. Likewise, if you study about the smokers and the non-smokers, the relative risk and attributable risk about diseases resulting from smoking, that is lung cancer and coronary heart disease, we find relative risk is about lung cancer is 12.86, unlike of coronary heart disease that is only 1.15. So definitely the risk of lung cancer is more in smokers compared to coronary heart disease in smokers. Likewise, attributable risk is 92.2% among of lung cancer among smokers compared to coronary heart disease among smokers. It means that lung cancer relative risk and attributable risk is more than that of coronary heart disease. So cigarette smoking has a role in causation of definitely has more role in causation of lung cancer among smokers compared to coronary heart disease, because coronary heart disease can be due to many other causes along with smoking. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of cohort studies? Number one is advantages. So incidence can be calculated. Several possible outcomes related to exposure can be studied simultaneously. For example, if you are studying about smoking and lung cancer, smoking can result in esophageal cancer, smoking can result in peptic ulcer, smoking can result in coronary heart disease. So several possible outcomes can be studied to exposure of smoking, which can be studied simultaneously. It provides direct estimate of relative risk, because we have the denominator that is a population at risk. We can calculate the incidence rates and subsequently the relative risk. Dose response ratios can be calculated by internal comparison. Certain types of bias can be eliminated or minimized, like misclassification of individuals into exposed and unexposed groups. Now, what are the disadvantages? It involves a large number of people. Unlike in a case control study, here we require a large number of people. We need to assemble a large number of people in the study cohort. We need to assemble a large number of people in a control cohort. It takes a long time to complete the study, say 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. So it takes a very long time. Administrative problems like loss of funding, loss of experienced staff, or migration of people, loss of a substantial portion of the original cohort in the form of attrition. That's what I said. It can be in the form of migration of people, and it can be due to withdrawal of occupation. It can be due to death, or it can be many other causes. Selection of comparison groups which are representative of the exposed and unexposed segments of the population is also a very limiting factor. Changes in the standard methods or diagnostic criteria of the disease over long follow-up. There may be changes because it is 10 years down the lane, or 20 years down the lane, or 5 years down the lane. At the end of the 5 years or 10 years, the diagnostic criteria of the disease, what we have earlier established at the beginning of the study, may be different with the passage of time, with more advanced tests and more advanced procedures. It's very expensive, as we need to recruit a large number of people and to also medically ensure their medical surveillance. It may alter people's behavior. So, if people who smoke, who are in the exposed group compared to that of non-exposed group, if they understand about the nature of the smoking, which may result in a disease, they may withdraw from smoking, or they may start smoking. Ethical problems. There are a lot of ethical problems involved as far as the conduct of this cohort studies are concerned. Practical considerations dictate concentration on a limited number of factors possibly related to disease outcome. Now, what are the differences between a case control study and cohort study? Proceed from effect to cause, as we understand from the previous lecture class, where we have studied how case control study proceeds backwards retrospectively, that is from effect to cause. Here it proceeds from cause to effect, that is prospective element. It starts with the disease, it starts with the people exposed to a particular risk factor, tests whether the suspected cause occurs more frequently in those with the disease, tests whether the disease occurs more frequently in those exposed to the risk factor. It's usually the first approach to the testing of a hypothesis. As I said earlier, the hypothesis is framed in a descriptive epidemiology. This is followed by a case control study, which is the first approach for the testing of a hypothesis is concerned. Now, after this case control study, the hypothesis is proved, or then we resort to a cohort study. So, a cohort study is reserved for testing of precisely formulated hypothesis. Involves a few number of subjects in a case control study, but in a cohort study, it involves a large number of subjects. It yields relatively quick results. Long follow-up period often is required. As I said earlier, it can be 10, 20, or 30 years. Suitable for study of rare disease is inappropriate when the disease is rare. Yields only relative risk. Relative risk in case of a case control study is known as odds ratio. Whereas it yields here in a cohort study, that is incidence rate, relative risk, and attributable risk. It cannot give information about disease other than the study disease. It can give information about more than one disease outcome. As I gave you an example in smoking and lung cancer, smoking will result in cancer esophagus. Smoking can result in peptic disease. Smoking can result in bronchial asthma. Smoking can result in many other outcomes. So many other disease outcomes can be got from this cohort study. It is relatively inexpensive. It is expensive. The various examples of cohort studies are smoking and lung cancer. So it is very important that we need to understand about what is a cohort study. Likewise, the other important example is Framingham heart study and oral contraceptives and health. So thank you for your patient hearing about the lecture class that is on cohort study. So as I said earlier, cohort study is a very important topic which comes in the university examination, and we have many long questions focused on cohort study, and many short notes also. The short notes, as I mentioned earlier, can be relative risk, attributable risk, or it can be population attributable risk, or differences between a cohort study and a case control study, or it can be what are the advantages of a cohort study, what are the disadvantages of the cohort study, And the long question can be outline the various epidemiological study designs, describe briefly the various steps of a cohort study, mentioning the examples. So one needs to understand and by heart and by rote the steps of a cohort study, that is selection of study groups, obtaining data and exposure, study of control cohort or control groups, follow-up and analysis. Here in this cohort study, we are going to analyze basically the incidence rates, relative risk and attributable risk. Suppose if we have the incidence of disease or death in the total population, we can also calculate what is a population attributable risk. Thank you very much for your patience.